Hi, good day to all. In this particular video session, what we'll be going through is the concept of unemployment and thus alternatively employment and also growth and production within an economy. What we're going to discuss now is something we're all familiar with. Every human being has a survival instinct. And for instance, we know we all need food, we all need shelter, and we all need clothing. Basic needs. And all of these could fall on the bracket of what we call consumption. We consume food, we consume services, we consume shelter, meaning we utilize. The word consumption here means to utilize, to use up. And therefore, in order to consume goods and services, income is needed. To acquire income, one as an individual, as an economic agent, one must engage in productive activities. And therefore, when you engage in the production process, you will be remunerated with an income, with a wage. But do you know, and I'm sure you are aware, that not everyone in society who is willing and able to work will be able to partake in the production process for one reason or the other. And therefore, if you're not partaking in the production process, you will not be able to acquire income or sometimes enough income to satisfy your demand for goods and services that you need. So this special phenomenon that occurs when individuals who are able and willing to work, but they are not able to find a job, we will call that unemployment. So therefore, let's look at it more precisely. We're going to define what is employment, and we're going to define what is unemployment. So employment is a situation where individuals who are able and willing to work have successfully found a job. Whereas unemployment is a situation where someone who is willing and able to work is not successful in finding a job. In these two definitions, we realize that this word willing and able keeps popping up. Now, what does it mean, someone who is willing and someone who's able to work? Well, let's look at it separately. Someone could actually be willing, but they may not be able to work. For instance, children. We know that there's an age limit for someone to be working because we know about child labor and in certain countries it's illegal and these different things. So a child may be willing to work to assist putting bread and butter on the table for their family. But at age 8, 9, and 10, in some countries where this may be illegal for children to be working, they may be willing to work, but by the laws of the land, they will not be able to work. So these individuals will not be counted as part of the labor force because they are not legally able to work, even though they may be willing to work. What about individuals who may have done something wrong and they are incarcerated, they are in prison? Physically and mentally, they may have the capacity to work. They may actually be willing to work. But of course, if you are incarcerated, you will not be able to work. And therefore, you will not be counted in the statistics of those who are seeking for jobs and able to work. So you will not be counted as being part of the labor force. So we have assessed what it means to be willing to work, but you may not be possibly able to work. Now, let us look at what it means to be able to work, but not willing to work. And I think that's more or less straightforward. Some people will be educated, be physically capable. However, for some reason, they're just not willing to work. This could be, for instance, someone could have been looking for a job. They may have been unemployed. They could have been willing and able to work at some point in time. But they have been, after looking for a job over and over again and not being successful, they could give up. Such an individual is described in economics as a discouraged worker. So while they have education, while they may be physically able to work, they may no longer be willing to work as they have now become discouraged. Such an individual, again, is not counted as being part of the labor force because they are no longer willing to work. So therefore, we already recognize that the labor force of any country would comprise of individuals who must both be willing to work and able to work. So in a labor force, it consists of all persons willing and able to work. And it can be segmented in terms of those who have been successful in finding a job, and thus they'll be defined as being employed, and those who have not been able to find a job, and they'll be defined as being unemployed. So the labor force makes up all persons who are willing and able to work, and part of that group will comprise those who have found a job and thus employed, and another part of that group will consist of those who have not been able to find a job and are defined as being unemployed. Now, other valuable indicators that pop up when we discuss employment would be the working adult population and the labor force participation rate. So the working adult population consists of all individuals that are of the age to legally work. Now, it doesn't matter whether they are part of the labor force or not, meaning whether they are willing and able to work, but what we're looking at is simply all of the individuals of a country that are of the legal age to work. So if you look at this example, we're saying here TNT has 1.3 million people, but a proportion of that 1.3, let's say approximately 1 million, may be of the legal age to work. So it means now that 1 million people constitutes the working adult population. So the balance of 300,000 people could be less than 18 years old. Or part of that could be less than 18 years old, and part of that number could consist of retirees. So what we're saying is that the 1 million people would be of the age possibly between 18 and 65 years of age, and the 300,000 balance could consist of individuals who are less than 18 years of age and greater than 65 years of age. Now, the labor force participation rate simply looks at the percentage of individuals that comprise the labor force out of the total adult population. So using the information prior with a population of 1.3 million for Trinidad and Tobago, and we said that the number of adults of age to work was 1 million, we can now calculate the labor force participation rate. So the labor force, which consists of those willing and able to work, we can say is 600,000. Okay? Now remember, 1.3 is the total population of Trinidad and Tobago, right, in this particular example. What we're seeing here also is that 1 million is the number of adults of age to work, right? The working adult population. Now, out of that working adult population, some people will be willing and able to work, and there are others who will not be willing and able to work. Again, roughly, that could consist of people who are students, individuals who are incarcerated. Those individuals will not constitute part of the labor force, but the individuals who are willing and able to work, some will find jobs and some will not find jobs. And what we are saying is that that number of individuals who are willing and able to work will be 600,000 out of the 1 million people who are of the age to work. So therefore, the labor force participation rate will simply be the 600,000 divided by the 1 million multiplied by 100, which would be 60%. So what we are saying here, therefore, is that 600,000 individuals comprise the labor force out of the total working adult population of 1 million. You get a fraction of 0.6, and when you multiply that by 100, you get a percentage of 60%. So 60% of the adult working population are able and willing to work, and of course will be therefore actively looking for a job. Okay? The unemployment rate, we would calculate it as the number of individuals who comprise the labor force and are unable to find a job. So in this particular example, we can say it's 100,000 individuals. So we give that particular rate, right? And what we're saying, if 100,000 individuals are willing and able to work, but they cannot find a job, we put that consists of those who are unemployed. So 100,000 individuals are unemployed. So what's the unemployment rate? Well, it's going to be 100,000 divided by the total labor force, and then multiply that figure by 100. And what we get here in this particular example is 16.67%. So given this particular example here, what we're saying is that with 100,000 people being unable to find a job while searching, it results in an unemployment rate of 16.7%. Therefore, the employment to working population ratio, which is another statistic, it looks at the total number of individuals who are employed with respect to the total working adult population. So this is another statistic that usually pops up in when we're discussing employment and unemployment. So the employment to working population ratio in this case is calculated by putting the numerator as the number of individuals employed and dividing it by a denominator, which in this case would be the working adult population. And then we multiply that by 100. And in this case here, 500,000 divided by 1 million multiplied by 100 gives us a value of 50%. So what we have on this particular slide is that we have discussed what the labor force participation rate is, and we have shown how to calculate it based upon information provided. And then we have calculated the unemployment rate. We must know what is the absolute number of individuals unemployed. And if we have the labor force participation rate, we simply put the numerator being the number of individuals unemployed divided by the labor force, and then whatever value it is calculated. We multiply that by 100 to get a percentage. In this case, 16.67%. And then we have the employment to working population ratio, which is looking at the number of individuals employed against the entire working adult population. And in this particular case here, the value is 50%. So we have gone through the rudiments or the basics of calculating simple indicators under the analysis of employment. So in the next video, we'll enter into discussion on the issue of real wage and of course the impacts on employment and output. Thank you.